Welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Sam Levine. Today this is the start of a new era in the First and Goal podcast. We have permanently found a new heavy air quotes studio, because not really a studio, it's a a tripod and a couple lights, but kind of a studio. Our permanent studio, new room where we were recording in. Here we've got my dad's at-home office. So yeah, that's where I'm going to be recording from now on. We went from the prison-like basement to the living room, which was very annoying for everyone else in the house because it was right in the living room. Then we went back downstairs, and now we're here again. So finally, we found a good spot for me to record, and here we are. This is where I will be recording from now on. But let's talk about football. I know when we're a little late with the draft talk, we're going to talk winners and losers of the draft, but I got held up with this because I tried to record this podcast last week, but I had some issues with storage on my computer, and it was a whole Magilla that we had to work out, and it was not fun. But here we are recording today, getting this podcast out. It is Tuesday, May 10th. So my first winner, let's talk winners and losers. My first winner of the draft, I guess almost 2 weeks ago now, would be the New York Jets. The New York Jets were one of, I think, the most improved, maybe the most improved team in football after this class, because what they did with their first three picks and then their fourth pick as well is they got pro-ready players who are starters right now. So not only was it a great draft class in that they got superstar potential players who could be real solid players that are going to be kind of strongholds of the team for the future for the next 5+ years. Hopefully, you get up into that 8-10 kind of year kind of player. I think all three of their top three picks could be guys like that. But not only that, these guys are ready to play right now. So the guys that they drafted, Ahmad Sauce Gardner, number 4 overall, Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, those were the 3 first-round picks, and then Breece Hall in the second round, 36th overall. All 4 of those guys are pro-ready. They will all be starters right away, which is huge for such a young team, because with a young team where most of your starters, I'm just looking at the Jets depth chart right here, most of the Jets starters are super young players. A lot of them drafted in the last few years. A lot of them just younger with other circumstances with upside. A lot of upside, right? They're one of the more young teams in the league. So when you get guys with a lot of potential who are very talented but are also pro-ready, who are also ready to start, it not only helps, your team get out of this rebuilding mode, but it also helps the other players on your team develop. So, for example, Zach Wilson is going to greatly improve this season, not only because it's his second year compared to his first, but also because they got him Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Now he has a really, really good running back to take the load off of his shoulders, adds more balance to that offense, but also they have a true wide receiver 1 right now. I think Garrett Wilson is going to be a star right away. He's a super, super good player. He's a really good route runner. He's very quick. He reminds me a lot of Justin Jefferson. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a Justin Jefferson-esque season in his rookie year, the way Jefferson did. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Jefferson was, because, JJ was off the charts. He was killer in his rookie year. He solidified himself as a top 10 wide receiver from day one, right? So I'm not saying Wilson is going to be that good, but I think he could break out like Jefferson did right away, right from the jump. He reminds me a lot of him, and he is a very, very guy. He's a guy who's ready to start right now. So you're giving Zach Wilson a number 1 wide receiver, which he didn't previously have. He didn't have that last year. So that's my point, in that you're helping other players develop as well. Now Ahmad Gardner can be your number 1 cornerback, and I think he is suited for that role. I think he will. Corner is a very difficult position to be judged, to judge rookies, because it's probably, besides quarterback, maybe tackle, probably the most difficult position to play in football. It might even be more difficult than tackle at this point, just with the way that so many flags get called on corners. It's very difficult to play the position. Now you've got guys like Brandon Echols and Michael Carter II, the cornerback, and Bryce Hall, who are all younger. They're not premier players, but they're younger players who can kind of develop into those second and third roles because they're not being asked to guard the top wide receivers on the opposing team. They can kind of hone in on those second, third, fourth wide receivers and grow into their roles. So it really helps other players a lot as well that they got pro-ready guys. But like I alluded to earlier, I think the top 4 of these guys will be starters for a long time for this team. Jermaine Johnson, especially their top 3 picks, Jermaine Johnson, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, they will be staples for this team. And they chose very good positions to draft because these were probably their 3 biggest needs on the entire team. Corner was terrible last season. They had no one there that was a true cornerback number 1. They got that guy in Sauce Gardner. Didn't give up a single touchdown in high school or college. Now we'll see how long that streak goes. I assume that that streak will break in his rookie year, but who knows, right? I mean, he's a superstar corner. Garrett Wilson, like I said, he's a true wide receiver 1. That's what he will be for Zach Wilson. I expect the 2 Wilsons to have a very good connection. That's going to start week 1 in their rookie season because he is ready to get on the field right away. And Jermaine Johnson, well, I don't think he's, ESPN, I really like their draft coverage. I like their guys, but they were making Jermaine Johnson out to be, the greatest player not the greatest player in the draft, but a top 5 player in the draft and a can't miss player. I mean, like, slow down, guys, relax. I mean, he's a good player, but he's not that good. They were making him out to be the steal of the draft when the Jets drafted him. And while I do think it was a steal, I probably think Johnson should have been taken not early 20s, but in the teens, right? Maybe mid to late teens, maybe early teens, somewhere in the teens. I think that would have been a good spot for him. So it is a steal, but it's not like relax. This guy isn't like Kayvon Thibodeau, Aiden Hutchinson territory. He's not that good. But I really love what the Jets did overall. They had an excellent draft. They excelled. I don't want to say excelled expectations, but I think they put themselves ahead. They accelerated their rebuild. They dug themselves out a little bit more of this hole than maybe you would have expected. I also liked the pick Max Mitchell, tackle, 112th overall, day 3, and then Jeremy Ruckert, 101 overall. That was a third-round pick. He's going to be a really good tight end. I think he could start, maybe not right away, but he'll be a starter for this team. I just love what they did. Joe Douglas, if there's a Joe Douglas fan club out there somewhere, sign me up, because I am a huge Joe Douglas fan. I will actually make that club. I'll start the Joe Douglas fan club, but he's my favorite GM in the league. And no, it is absolutely not Brian Gutekunst, the general manager of the Packers. He's my least favorite because he causes me so much freaking pain every year. So much pain. But yeah, the Jets just had a great draft. They knocked it out of the park. The Baltimore Ravens are my second winner because the value that they got out of their picks were exceptional, especially their top 3 picks. Taking Kyle Hamilton, 14th overall, when he was a top 5, maybe top 3 player in the draft. Tyler Linderbaum at 25th overall, who's one of the best center prospects we've seen in the last 10 years, maybe in the last, not century, but relax. Relax, I was about to say century, but maybe in the 21st century. And then Michigan edge rusher David, I don't really know how to say this name. It's Ojabo. I think it's Ojabo. Maybe Oyabo, but I think it's Ojabo. Getting him 45th overall was absolutely a steal as well. He was a first-round prospect, but he tore his Achilles at his pro day, which sent him sliding a little bit. Now, I know he probably won't play right away, which is fine for the Ravens because they're still a playoff contending team. who they have some good edge rushers as well. Tyus Bowser, Odafe Owe are good players. It's not like they have a pressing need at edge rusher. However, they could use one. And in 2023, maybe towards the end of 2022, Achilles is a tough injury. We don't really know when he'll be coming back. But regardless, he will be back for 2023, the latest. They're going to get some serious reinforcement in this guy, in the Michigan alum, in 2023 because he's such a good player. If he didn't get this injury, he would have been a top 25 pick. He's so explosive off the edge. He's just a great edge rusher, and they can, again, ease him back into the lineup because he can work in that rotational role. He doesn't need to be a full-time, every down starter. So I really like that pick. And then Kyle Hamilton, I think I loved him as a prospect. I love those guys who are super versatile, who you can use as those kind of chess pieces to move all around the field and cover whoever you want. Cover linebackers. Yeah, exactly. Cover running backs. Cover tight ends. Maybe cover some slot wide receivers. Kyle Hamilton can do it all, and he really can also play in the box as that kind of like linebacker role. He's the most versatile player in the class. He's one of the more versatile players we've seen in a long time. Isaiah Simmons is really the only guy I can think of that rivals his versatility. And the Ravens are so key on that versatility that Hamilton brings. They love to have guys that they can move around the field, guys that they can use in different sets and different packages. And now that they had two starting caliber safeties before, and Marcus Williams, who's a great safety from the Saints, free agent signing, and then Chuck Clark at strong safety. He's another really good player as well. Now Hamilton, I feel like he might start at strong safety sometimes, but then sometimes you bring Chuck Clark in and you move Hamilton around the field. It just keeps the offense guessing, and it kind of adds that element of surprise to the offense. It's like, we need to keep track of this guy because what is he going to do now, right? It's never as clear-cut as, okay, we know what you're going to do. This is what you're going to do, right? We can pin down what, as a player, you are going to do, but it's kind of like you're getting another weapon in the Swiss Army knife that is Hamilton, because now the offense has to prepare in so many different ways for this guy, and it's really a huge luxury. It's really a huge luxury to have another guy like this, and we're seeing this trend in the NFL a lot more, where teams really want a third safety who can play in the box, who can play in the slot. It's why teams like the Bengals drafted, or it's why the Bengals, when you have Jesse Bates at safety already in the same position that Dax Hill plays, kind of the same role, it's why you draft Dax Hill, right? So that you can have another safety that you can move around the field, because Dax Hill is versatile. He does play corner or slot corner, which is a valuable thing to have a safety that can do that. So having those multiple safeties, 3 safeties, is something that we're seeing a lot more in today's NFL, where teams like to have those guys that they can move around. And listen, the Ravens got the best safety in the class, who's a star player, to do that with. This kind of reminds me of when Derwin James, a few years ago, when Derwin James slid. He slid to pick 17. The Chargers got him, and he's a superstar. He's a Pro Bowl type player. He's an All-Pro, safety. He's incredible. He's very versatile. He's not like one of those Swiss Army knife type players, but he is versatile, and he's a stud. He's a stud. He's a great player. So this reminds me of that, and Kyle Hamilton dropped all the way down because of his position, right? Safety isn't it's not a premium position. You don't often look to draft a safety top 8, top 10. It's not really considered a good pick when you do. So that's why he dropped. But regardless, the Ravens get a superstar player, a guy who is going to start right away and has potential to be an all-pro, Pro Bowl type caliber player for the Ravens, which is exceptional. And the Ravens are so good at finding guys like that. They're so good at finding diamond-in-the-rough players. Or, not even diamond-in-the-rough players. I mean, what am I saying? This guy's not a diamond-in-the-rough player. He's a stud. This is a guy that was top 5, top 3 player. But they're so good at getting those steals. whenever they pick, it feels like they're taking a guy who should have been taken earlier. There always feels like they're getting exceptional value on their selections. Tyler Linderbaum, great pick as well. He's going to be a day one starter, day one center for them. I also really liked some picks. Third round, Travis Jones, the defensive tackle. I really like that pick. David Faalele, Jalen Armour Davis, Charlie Kohler, all guys that could grow into starting roles and are guys with a lot of potential, a lot of talent, could grow into starting roles. So, of course, the Ravens are doing Ravens things, drafting exceptionally well. Really just, I mean, they knocked this one out of the park. They really did. So my third and final winner is the Kansas City Chiefs. This is another team that got exceptional value on all of their selections. At pick 21, they selected Trent McDuffie, the cornerback out of Washington. Now, cornerback was a need for them because Charvarius Ward, the corner, number 35, is there for a little while. He was a good player. He left to go to San Francisco this offseason. He was a free agent. Regardless, they could have looked at corner anyway because it wasn't the strongest position for them. But with him leaving, it was absolutely a big need. So they got McDuffie, who is a super physical cornerback, very, very, very good tackler, the best tackler out of all the cornerbacks in this entire class. And I love when my cornerbacks are physical, when they are willing to make tackles, and they're good at wrapping up. They're good at making open field wrap-ups because that's crucial with corners. If you're not good at that, you're going to get exploited, and offenses are going to look to target you. But McDuffie's got that covered already. Some teams don't love his size. He's 5'10". However, it's not the biggest issue for me because we've seen some smaller corners like Jair Alexander, Asante Samuel Jr., who's with the Chargers, was a rookie last year. Some smaller corners have success. So it's not the biggest issue for me, and it also makes up for it that he's physical. So that kind of makes up for it a little bit for me. I really love this player. I think he should have been taken top 15, maybe I thought 12 was a good time for him to go. I thought 12 was kind of the earliest he could go and where I predicted him to go maybe. 12 was where the Vikings were selecting, but when they traded out, that kind of went down the drain. But I thought pre-draft, that's where he could have gone. But 21 is way too low for him. Way too low for him. So the Chiefs got a great player, great steal. George Karlaftis at pick 30 was another guy who I think should have been taken a lot earlier. This was a guy who, a while ago, was being considered a top 10 prospect. I don't really know what happened to his draft stock, but it definitely went down a little bit. But I don't think it should have gone down this much, and I don't think it did. For whatever reason, he slid. He was a top 15 prospect, in my opinion. He should have been taken top 15, worst top 20. But to get him at 30 near the end of the first round, that's an exceptional pick. That really is. He's a super physical guy. He's 6'4". He's a big, big player. He's not one of those super fast guys, but he's very powerful. He's a powerful power rusher. He's got a great bull rush, and he'll fit in. He'll be probably a starter right away. He'll fit in with this Chiefs defense, be a day one starter because they do have a hole. They could use some edge rush help. Frank Clark is pretty good on the other side, but Karlaftis probably starts right away. The biggest steal, though, is Sky Moore. At number 54 overall, they got Sky Moore, and this is a huge steal for me because to think that the Patriots, who we'll talk about in a little bit, drafted Tyquan Thornton over Sky Moore is ridiculous. Sky Moore is one of those smaller, he's 5'10", quicker, rack, run after catch, speed type wide receivers. He's a very, very good player. I like him a lot. But he adds that extra element of speed that and quickness that the Chiefs lost after they lost Tyreek Hill. So I love that pick. And obviously, wide receiver, a big need, like we said, after losing Tyreek Hill. So now they've got a nice mix of guys with Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Mecole Hardman, Sky Moore. just I'd like to see where Moore lands. I think he's going to be a starting guy. Maybe not from like day one, but during the season, I think he'll become that. But other than that, if I kind of they got a solid wide receiver by committee thing going, and if that can work out, I think they could. Maybe it may take them a little bit to kind of get that chemistry up because there are a bunch of new faces in that wide receiver room. But I think get a few weeks under their belt, they could end up picking up right where they left off without Tyreek Hill. And, of course, they still have Travis Kelce to lean on, so no biggie there. But those top three picks, Moore, Karlaftis, and McDuffie, they're all steals. They're all really good picks that Phil needs, so I like them a lot. They also got some good value in Leo Chenal. I'm, again, not sure how to say this name. It's Chenal, Chenal, I think. 103 overall in the third round. Linebacker. Linebacker isn't a huge need for them. Not really a need at all, but still a very good player that I'm sure they can find a way to mix into the rotation because it's not the most solid position for them. But still, they can definitely find a way to get him playing because he's a very, very talented player that should have been taken way before pick 103. I also like the pick Darian Kennard, 145. That was a good pick. I like that. Now getting into the losers of the draft. The Bears. The Chicago Bears. Bears are going to Bears, right? The Bears are going to be the Bears. I mean, it's ridiculous that we expect anything different from the Bears, but they crapped away at this draft. I mean, that's honestly what happened. They sent this draft down the toilet. I mean, it was terrible. It was terrible. I'm sorry, I'm tearing up here as I talk about the Bears, but they're tears of joy because it's so funny to me to see my division rival and my supposed bitter rival, even though they're a joke, my supposed bitter rival is just this bad at everything. They're terrible drafters. I mean, what is this draft? You have a young rookie quarterback who has no weapons, like none whatsoever, besides Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney, 1,000-yard wide receiver, he's really good, but I don't think he's a true wide receiver one. I don't think he's a guy that can, carry an offense as a lead guy like Devontae Adams or DeAndre Hopkins can. He's not that type of player. David Montgomery is a good running back, but he's not like a star, and they don't. You need support in the passing game for Fields, and they just don't have it. And they don't have it even now after the draft. But going into the draft, you don't have it, right? The wide receivers aren't there. Cole Kmet, he hasn't really shown that he's a great tight end anyway, either. So you need pass catchers. So what do? You need pass catchers for your young quarterback. What do? Oh, well, you draft a cornerback and a safety with your first two picks. What else would you do? You have two picks in the second round. High picks, 39 and 48. What do? You need wide receivers. So naturally, the selection is cornerback and safety. Naturally, we take defensive. What? What are the Bears doing? I mean, I love it. It's funny. It's so funny. It's so funny to me. Because you could take, at pick 39, who is available? Oh, Alec Pierce. He reminds me a lot of Jordy Nelson. Good route runner, kind of a refined player. One of the more pro-ready wide receivers there is. Alec Pierce you got. You got Sky Moore, who should have been taken. Top 45 for sure. Top 40. He's right there. You could have had either of those guys at either of those picks. And also, why aren't you taking an offensive lineman? Bernard Raymond? I forget whether the N or the M comes first. I'm really bad with names in this class. But I believe Bernard Raymond was available. He was picked 77th overall. He's a tackle. 77th overall to the Indianapolis Colts. That was a steal by the Colts. Why didn't you take him here? Why didn't you take a tackle? You needed offensive line. Your first offensive line pick didn't come till the 5th round. Pick 168. What is this team doing? Do they want Justin Fields to succeed? I don't know. I truly don't know. And my best guess would be I don't think so. Because they haven't shown that they want him to succeed. They aren't surrounding him with players to put him in a good situation. They didn't sign anyone significant this offseason. Their big offensive signing was Byron Pringle. Byron Pringle. He was like the 4th or 5th wide receiver on the Chiefs roster. And he's the guy who's going to save this offense. He's the guy who's going to save the receiving core. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. He had 500 yards and 5 touchdowns last year. He's a depth guy. He's not a starter. And in the 3rd round, you take Velus Jones Jr., who I'm not a fan of at all. That was a reach. He should have been late 3rd, early 4th. So the one wide receiver you add, or you add Pringle, and then the only other wide receiver you add to the roster is a reach in the 3rd round who's not anywhere close to starting caliber, who's not anywhere close to being ready to start. That's your grand plan to make Justin Fields succeed? That's your plan, Bears. Are you okay with this, Bears fans? I mean, it's ridiculous. Your interior offensive line needs help. Lucas Patrick is an okay center. You signed him this offseason. He's okay. I don't even know who Dakota Dozier is, the right guard. I've never heard of him until literally 5 seconds ago. So I don't know. I understand Larry Borom and Tevin Jenkins were rookies last year. They were tackles. Those are the 2 tackles. Tevin Jenkins had a terrible rookie year, so you could have replaced him if you wanted to. Absolutely fine with that, even though he was a rookie last year. Larry Borom was a 5th-round pick. I think he had a pretty solid year last year when he played. But again, rookie, so I'm fine with you keeping him, or second-year player. I'm fine with you keeping him at starter. So I don't have the huge issue with tackles. But why not get into your offensive lineman? You need help. Fields was under constant duress last season. He didn't have time. He didn't have anyone to throw to. So you get defensive backs. It's blasphemous. How negligent of your young rookie quarterback can you be? The only priority that you should have is Justin Fields and is making him succeed. After Mitch Trubisky failing, after you guys failing him, after him not panning out as your franchise quarterback, you should not take no for an answer with Fields. You should not take failure as an acceptable outcome. You should do everything in your power to make him succeed. And you're not doing it. The Bears are not doing it. I mean, not that Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker, the 2 players they drafted at 39 and 48, not that they're bad players, because they're not. They're really good players. They're good defensive backs. It's just, like why? Like, sure, safety is a need, but again, safety not a premier position. So when you have those needs at premier positions, like offensive line, wide receiver become more of one in the last few years now that it's such a pass-heavy league. But when you have a need at one of those positions, obviously it should trump safety, because safety is not a premier position. Corner is. I understand corner. However, you absolutely should not be taking a corner when you need to help your young quarterback as badly as you do. They just botched this. I mean, it was terrible. It's terrible what they did in this draft. Really, really atrocious, disgraceful to Justin Fields. And I feel bad for him. But you know what? I'm honestly cool with it. I'm not going to complain at all, because I'm honestly cool with it. As long as the Bears are bottom feeders of the league continually, I'm all good, because I'm a huge Packers fan. So, yeah. So, I'm praying on the Bears' downfall. The next loser is the Jaguars. So, much like the Bears, the Jaguars are one of the only teams that can screw up something this badly consistently. When you're picking when you're picking top 10, 15 out of the last 16 years, you're obviously doing something wrong, right? So let's just keep that in mind when we talk about the Jaguars draft. Their first overall pick, Travon Walker, I hated it. Why? Okay, sure, you say he may have more upside and more potential than Aiden Hutchinson. I don't even believe that. I don't believe that for 1 second. But let's not take my word for it. Let's look at the combine. Aiden Hutchinson ran a better 3-cone drill than Travon Walker. All the athleticism tests, he tested just as good or better than Walker. So that athleticism factor that we say Travon Walker has on Hutchinson, it's not necessarily real. It's not necessarily there. Hutchinson has great speed. He's super physical. And the Lions lucked out because they didn't want Walker. They wanted Hutchinson. Of course they wanted Hutchinson. Who wouldn't want Hutchinson over Walker? I mean, seriously. Walker was... He's a very good player, but he has no production in college. Zero production in college. He had under 10 sacks in his entire career throughout 3 seasons. Averages out to 3 sacks a year. That's not good. He was taken purely on potential, and I don't like that. I don't like taking guys based on purely potential, especially at the top of the draft, because it's kind of like gambling. And you don't want to gamble with your top overall pick. You want to get a guy who you know is going to change your franchise, and that guy is Aiden Hutchinson. Hutchinson has the proven production. He has it. He was runner-up for Heisman last year in college. So, just how they messed this up, I don't know. It's ridiculous. It honestly is ridiculous. And this streak of me not being a fan of the Jaguars classes continues because, I mean, it was just a mistake to take Walker. It really was. Hutchinson is just a better player. I think he's got just as much, if not more, potential than Walker does. And he's just as athletic. He reminds me a lot of the Bosa boys. I know it's a cliche. I know a lot of people are saying it, but it's true. It's a cliche for a reason. A lot of people, you know, are on that kind of bandwagon with Hutchinson, but it's true. It's the truth. It's the truth. I also didn't like them taking linebacker twice in the top 70. You know, you had 4 picks in the top 3 rounds, and you didn't have a 4th rounder, and 2 of those 4 picks were spent on linebacker. It doesn't really make sense. Like, sure, linebacker was a need, but once you got Devin Lloyd, pick 27 overall, it should be done. Right there, like, you don't need another linebacker. And then they took Chad Muma. What was it? 70 overall? Yeah, 70 overall. Like, it didn't make any sense to me, especially when you needed help at safety, interior defensive line. More, you could have used it more on the offensive line, and definitely a wide receiver. Now, I know they think Christian Kirk is a top wide receiver in the league and a true wide receiver 1. Spoiler alert, he's not. But I know that they think he does. But they still need another wide receiver. Zay Jones, Marvin Jones Jr., Christian Kirk that's not a wide receiver room. That's not a starting core of wide receivers. It isn't, okay? They need another wide receiver. They needed more. And I think, give me 1 second. I think Jalen Tolbert was available, wide receiver from South Alabama. I think he was available at this pick, at pick 70. Jalen Tolbert draft selection. I think he was taken in the 80s. Yeah, 88th overall pick. So you could have taken Jalen Tolbert. That would have been a great pick. Wide receiver. Really, really good pick. He should have been taken a little bit earlier. I think 70 would have been a good spot for him. He could have even gone late second. But you take him there, and you add another young guy, athletic guy, to your wide receiver room, and this draft looks better. Even though Walker was a huge whiff, he could turn out to be a really good player. I'm not trying to cut on him at all. He could. But given the information that we know, Hutchinson's the guy, the clear guy. And it's not like I believe that the Jaguars have some immense, scouting ability to see something that everyone else is missing. Because, again, they're the Jaguars. Like I said, 15 out of the last 16 years, they're picking top 10. So, they have a track record of not drafting great. Also, there are a lot of reports and rumors coming out in the last few days about Walker that nobody else really had him as the top player in this class, or maybe even the top 3 player in the class. Most people had, Hutchinson clearly over him. So I'm just really not a fan of their class and what they did here. Next, my final loser, and I really hate to call them losers, is the New England Patriots. This one is weird because Bill Belichick and loser don't really go together. However, I really didn't love this draft. Cole Strange in the first round, he is better than people made him out to be. He's not a day 3 prospect. He was a day 2 guy, maybe second, probably third, kind of one of those guys that could have blended in. Definitely not a day 1 guy. So it was a reach. It wasn't the most egregious reach in the world, but it was a reach. This isn't a guy who I think is ready to start. I think he's a very raw prospect. Definitely not the way I would have gone if I was the Patriots, because you traded Shaq Mason, who was a top 5 guard in the league last year. He's a Pro Bowl, all-pro type guard, type starter. You traded him for chump change. You traded him for a 5th-round pick. In return, you get Cole Strange, who's going to start immediately at left guard, and he's a very raw rookie. So you're taking a huge step back there. I really just don't like the play. I don't think he's a really good player. I think there were better players available at that position if they wanted to go there. They also could have gone wide receiver, which they decided to go with at pick 50 overall, or they could have gone corner at that position. There were a bunch of other ways they could have gone, but guard was a huge issue. I'm not trying to prove that wrong. It's just Cole Strange was not the guy to go with at guard. But the wide receiver pick is the guy I think is more egregious, because Tyquan Thornton, that was a reach at pick 50. He was a 3rd-round prospect for sure. And not only was he a 3rd-round prospect, you also had guys like Sky Moore and Alec Pierce available. Guys who will be starters. Guys who are starting caliber, who are pro-ready players. These are guys who you're drafting them knowing that they have the ability to be starters. Tyquan Thornton is a guy who runs fast. He's athletic. He doesn't have a great route tree. He's not a starter. He's not there. He probably will be. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but this is a riskier pick. This is not a guy who is anywhere close to as good as Pierce or Moore. And you wanted the speed, you could have taken Moore. Moore is very fast. He's very athletic. So I really just don't like the pick for Thornton. He's just not as complete of a wide receiver. He's nowhere close to pro-ready. His main calling card is his speed, but he doesn't have a lot else going for him. I'm just not a huge fan of the pick at all. So I think that the top 2 picks are really where the Patriots messed up here. Marcus Jones is could turn out to be a good pick. The Houston cornerback. He's a good player. Could turn out to be a good pick, and they did need a corner. So I like that pick. But Bailey Zappe, the cornerback from Western Kentucky, why? In the 4th round, you have Mac Jones. Why would you do that? I didn't like that pick at all. It's just they had a bunch of mind-boggling picks. I don't have any issues with the positions that they took, except for Bailey Zappe in the 4th round. But wide receiver and guard, that was good that they identified that. It's just the players that they took, especially with other guys available, that was very confusing, and I'm definitely not a fan of that. Definitely think they whiffed on those picks, so they messed up there. So that'll wrap it up for the winners and losers segment of the show. Let's continue.